For a young child, parents are supposed to be a source of constant love, protection, and support. For children with drug addictive or abusive parents, however, life at home is anything but that. After being raised in a toxic home with abusive and drug-addicted parents, one woman found herself homeless and filled with self-hatred. She was ready to end it all until she heard a voice that led her down a path she'd never even dreamed of. As a child, Danny Johnson grew up on welfare in a home that no child should ever have lived in. Both her mother and stepfather were drug addicts, and she was subjected to physical, emotional, mental, verbal, and sexual abuse by her violent stepfather every single day. As Danny got older, her parents' drug addiction had worsened, which meant her stepfather's extremely violent temper had also gotten worse. Life for Danny was completely unbearable at home, but she turned to her faith and the church to help her get through it all. However, when Danny was just 17 years old, she became pregnant by the deacon's son, and she was no longer accepted by the only support system she'd ever had. Danny gave birth to the baby out of wedlock and decided to give her child up for adoption. While at church, Danny had always been taught about forgiveness and hoped that the community would extend that same courtesy to her at such a difficult time in her life. However, the teenager was brutally judged and shunned by her fellow Christians. They had all kinds of judgment and major criticism and even almost excommunication, Danny said about the community's reaction. In fact, my parents would not talk to me after that, which was so hilarious because the lifestyle they led, what right did they have to judge? After that, Danny left her church and her home and started supporting herself. At 19, she got introduced to the idea of becoming an entrepreneur when a boyfriend invited her to a symposium where millionaire entrepreneurs were speaking. That day, a seed was planted in Danny's head. Danny knew that even if she was only a fraction as successful as the speakers, she would be making more money than she could make working any other job as a high school dropout. For the first 6 months, Danny was failing miserably, but then things started to turn around. Over the next 6 months, Danny attended 6 seminars and actually started making some money. However, at one of the training seminars, she met a man and thought she'd fallen in love with the man of her dreams. Within 7 days, I was married to him, Danny said. At 21 years old, Danny was married for the first time and followed her new husband to Hawaii. A few months later, Danny discovered her Prince Charming was really just a con man when he abandoned her and left with all of her hard-earned money. Not only did the con man steal all of Danny's money, but he left her with a crippling debt. I was left with $2.03 to my name, a $35,000 debt, completely homeless, 50 pounds overweight, said Danny, who was then fired from her job. December 1st, I was evicted from my house and I was completely homeless. Danny thought she'd hit rock bottom, but then her life spiraled even further out of control. Danny started doing drugs, the one thing she vowed she'd never do. I was stoned out of my mind for 2 months, sleeping with 8 different guys. I got to eat only by dating all these people, said Danny, who was living out of her car and was struggling to make enough money to survive as a waitress. I realized that I had become worse than the family I grew up in, and that was devastating, Danny explained. My whole life was filled with horror and terror and lies, and I vowed that I would never be like my family. And there I was, doing cocaine. On Christmas Eve, Danny went on an alcohol and cocaine binge with other waitresses at the beach. When she woke up the next morning, she was filled with so much self-loathing that she tried to end it all by drowning herself in the ocean. But as she was underwater, she heard a voice that told her to pick up your mat and walk. Danny rolled up her beach mat, hiked a mile to her car, and drove 45 minutes back to the beach she was living at. All the while, a war was going on inside her head. One voice was telling Danny to turn her life around, while the other voice in her head was telling her she was worthless and to drive into the ocean. I have no idea why I chose to listen to that first voice, said Danny, who started thinking, trying to figure out her options. She knew no one, had no money to buy a plane ticket back to California, and needed about $4,500 to rent an apartment. Danny went to bed that night in her car without any solution. When she woke up the next morning, she found her answer. There was this weight loss program I had purchased long before I was homeless, lying in the back seat. I had used it for a week. I never paid attention to it before, and it just caught the corner of my eye in the sun, Danny said. I picked it up, and it was as if this thing was saying, I'm your answer. Danny went to a payphone, called the manufacturer, and decided to start selling the program in Hawaii. She used every last cent to set up the business out of her car and put up handwritten flyers around the island. She made $2,000 the first 4 days and $4,000 worth of sales the next month. Soon enough, Danny had enough money to get off the streets and even open up a weight loss center to better meet the needs of her customers and growing business. That year, Danny earned $250,000 and made $1 million by the end of her second year. She quickly started expanding the business by training employees and opening up more weight loss centers. While opening up a center in California, Danny met her future husband, Hans, when he applied to work at the new center the day it opened. Soon after, Danny was pregnant. Danny was on top of the world, but within 2 years she was broke again. She'd been embezzled and lost her clients. Danny was again suicidal, but Hans stopped her. Danny then rebuilt the business and sold it in 1996. By that point, she was a multi-millionaire and went on to become a best-selling author, an international speaker, a radio talk show host, and all while running 5 companies. Today, Danny lives in Northern California with Hans and their 5 children. She's since been reunited with the daughter she gave up for adoption and has 4 grandchildren. When I got the call for Secret Millionaire, when I got the call for Oprah, I still ask myself, is this really happening? Is this really real, or am I still sleeping in my car in Hawaii and I'm gonna wake up and it's all been a dream? There was a divine purpose to my homelessness. It wasn't for nothing. It wasn't for my humiliation. It was for my purpose, and I accept that now.